Well, this is a topic that I've treated before, but I think it's important to come back to it, and to, especially given the circumstances. I was reminded yesterday by several sources that yesterday was the 150th anniversary of the birth of Gandhi, October 2nd, 1869. And there was, as you may have seen, there was an op-ed piece in the New York Times by the Prime Minister of India on that subject. And then I was also reminded by an email from the director of Pax Christi, the Catholic peace movement, of the same event. And it's been discussed, in international political organizations. Pope Francis, for his International Day of Peace message, dedicated to the theme of nonviolence. So I think it's important to look at the different dimensions of nonviolence and see what we can learn from it from the spiritual point of view, and how that applies to our lives. I think it's from the Hindu tradition. Of course, it's the notion of ahimsa, which means not harming. And I think that comes from, this, namaste, this sense of the beauty and the majesty and the intrinsic dignity of everything, not just human beings, but all, living creatures. They wouldn't harm, cows, for example, but they not harm anything. And, wonder how far that can go, You may have read the book Eat, Pray, Love, where in the ashram there, she finally lets herself be consumed by mosquitoes, That's a tricky one for me. Personally, I'd like to think that sometimes I can just say, well, there's enough blood for both of us, But I'm absolutely gobsmacked by the synchronicity of things, because in the Daisen room, there was a mosquito. Just now. What are the chances? Of course I didn't see it at first, but then I noticed, uh-oh. You can see there, quite big, bites right there. And sure enough, as I was talking to one of the people who came in, I saw it, And then just before I came back out, there it was, majestically perched on the chair's leg of the chair in front of me. Why not majestically? It's gorged with my blood. And I didn't kill it. So I'm really proud of myself. But what are the chances? So anyway, it more clearly applies, people, and maybe still some of us, I hope not, but some of us, you see a spider or a cockroach or something like that, and you step on it, that's terrible. Why would you do that? They have just as much right to live, So, I don't like it, I'm scared of it. Well, that's the way most people treat the truth. I don't like it, I'm scared of it. So, wise up. That's just one it's not to trivialize nonviolence, but it on the contrary, it's important to be able to extend it, as far as we possibly can. But of course, obviously, there are other dimensions. I think of just in how is it manifested? Also, for example, in Zen, you've got Zen doesn't talk much about this. In fact, if anything, you sometimes have a kind of like a seemingly violent impression. When a master will, brandish a stick, or even maybe slaps one over the shoulder. If you've been to a sesshin, you know that sometimes they go around with a stick and they actually strike you very strongly on the shoulder. That's not violence. And it's certainly not, anything to do with anger or anything like that. It's a grace. It's actually a sign of love and connection, to help you to stay awake. So it's not the amount of energy that goes into something. That's the problem. You can't judge just because it's a lot of energy that it's violent, but that's not at all the case. And this is important for understanding nature too. Nature is not violent. We put that interpretation on things. Like a big storm at sea or waves crashing against the shore. It's not violent, it's just energetic. There's no anger or anything being expressed there. And even with prey and predator, that's just the way of life, the way things are interconnected. Something is prey and then predator becomes prey, and it's just the way things work. And there's not anger or hatred there. In a sense, not violence in that sense at all. It's innocent. So it's really important to grasp that. Now, when that comes to the evolution of humanity, and then we start preying on each other the same way, animals, there's something else at work there, because we are called to another level of evolution where we are fostering life and furthering life for each other and expressing love and connection that we all feel. And don't forget, there's plenty of love and connection in nature. Lots of cooperation and different fields of connection, levels of cooperation in nature too. So we do have to evolve beyond a certain point, beyond mere, if you like, animal instinct, because in us it gets tied up then with egotism and anger and hatred and these things which are, if not specifically human, very, very characteristically human. And violence can be expressed, of course, also in structures of society. And here's where the other element of nonviolent resistance comes in that Gandhi was famous for, where you can resist nonviolently without hatred in your heart, without anger and irritation in your heart, but out of love of truth. Satyagraha, the power of truth. It's even the name of an opera, a modern opera, as you know, about Gandhi. There's, again, it's not the energy for justice and love and truth can be very strong, but if it's not fed by, anger or hatred, as it shouldn't be, then there's nothing violent about it. It can be very strong, but it's not violent. One of the unjust structures, I was just reading this in a story from De Mello, a true story about Gandhi, and when he was a young man in South Africa, as you know, he was reading the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the meek, all this, nonviolence, it's all over the place in the Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies, pray for those that persecute you, turn the other cheek, all of that. So he went to a church. Well, that was the end of that. Because they told him, you can't, this is a white church, you've got to go to it. A colored person's church, Talk about violent structures. So that's the kind of thing. And then you can look, this is the way Jesus would resist as well, with bringing in the money changers, etc., into the temple. There's a prophetic witness there. And people are always saying this, look how violent Jesus was. That's not violent. It's prophetic witness. It's what Lama John McCransky is called, severe compassion. Jesus was not animated by hatred or anger or irritation. He was being prophetic. He was exercising a powerful witness to the rightness of things, the way things should be for the full blossoming of humanity and understanding of God, etc. So that kind of thing is necessary, and it can sometimes mean, or seem to mean, where you're doing violence to material things, like overturning money changers' tables, or something like that, or burning draft records, or whatever it might be. But think of it this way. Material things are all part of a connected web of energy that we're part of too. So if they're being mistreated and misused by put to the wrong use, or brought together to create a nuclear bomb or something, well, that's violence to material creation. That's the real violence. So when that's being protested against, you're actually liberating material energy, from its bonds to a particular misuse. Think of it that way. So nonviolence is much more a matter of making sure that life is furthered and enhanced, and the attitude in your heart. You want to enhance life. It's never done out of hatred, certainly not, or out of anger. Now, Gandhi was a very good example of that too. Nonviolent resistance to the political oppression of India. You didn't hate the British. It's a very good example. Another story from de Mello, apparently a true story, when he found out that Prince Philip was engaged to Princess Elizabeth towards the end of Gandhi's life. Mountbatten, the last viceroy of India, informed him of the engagement, and he was delighted, and he said, "I'm very happy to hear about that, but I have nothing to offer." And Mountbatten apparently said, Gandhi always, carried around the spinning wheel and, native industry, etc. So he said, "Well, why don't you make something with your spinning wheel?" So he made him a tablecloth. And Mountbatten, when he sent it to Elizabeth, said, "Keep this with the crown jewels." Because, a quote from Gandhi, "We want the British to depart as friends. No enemies, no hatred. You witness to what's enhancing life for the multitude and say what oppression is oppression, but you don't do it out of hatred. And shouldn't be any enemies." And, Gandhi, of course, was also opposed to the creation of what we now have as Pakistan. Muslims and Hindus should be able to live together. And of course, that didn't happen through no fault of his. And look what Pakistan is today on the world stage. So this kind of division is not what we're looking for. We should be able to be able to live as friends. And anger and hatred should not be part of that. Of course, political structures easily lend themselves to violence because they're defending themselves or they're being aggressive. Look at the history of nations. Even as soon as nations and religions get too identified with each other, look at Christianity and the conquistadors, and even fighting among themselves, and the spread of Islam in the violent way, even early Judaism. But there's plenty of it. As I said a few weeks ago. Look at Myanmar today or Kashmir today. But this is a very well put paragraph from Richard Rohr in his Universal Christ. Did you know that the first 7 councils of the church, agreed upon by both East and West, were all either convened or formally presided over by emperors? What? Because religion is used as a coercive force for order and control, sometimes even by the church itself. So as soon as you get the identification, of empire and church, as happened in Christianity and Islam and others, well, then you're going to get violence. It becomes subservient to the political power. This is no small point, he says. Emperors and governments do not tend to be interested in an ethic of love or service or nonviolence, God forbid, because they're empires which were intrinsically violent. And surely not forgiveness unless it somehow helps them stay in power. So violence political violence, and that kind of violence that goes with that, is something that particularly will need to be resisted, or the empire of India, of England towards India, for example. So nonviolence is always going to be a minority position among, well, in politics, and sometimes, as we see, even in religion. So, but it's important to be able to witness to it, because love is the central energy of the universe, as all the religions point out, whether it's compassion or loving kindness in Buddhism, or charity or love of neighbor, love of enemies in Christianity, or whatever it might be. This is the driving force, and this is the main reason for nonviolence, because reality is nonviolent. The whole energy of the universe is expansion and love. And therefore, an energy push to resist everything that resists it. That's the resistance part of nonviolence. So it's very energetic, etc., as has been pointed out. And I'll conclude by reading some of these reflections from Richard Rohr's Daily Meditations. A week or two ago, he had 3 days in a row on nonviolence, quoting Gandhi and others. Gandhi used to say that every world religion knows that Jesus taught nonviolence, lived nonviolently, died a nonviolent death, except one religion, Christianity. Well, Gandhi took the gospel and his own Hindu texts seriously. He believed our core identity is union with God. In Zen terms, connection to the whole of reality. That's our core identity, is connection to the whole. That's who we are. So therefore, the fruit of this union is nonviolence. Because if you're doing violence to yourself. Because you're all one. It's all one. You can't do violence to something and not hurt yourself. Literally hurt yourself. Gandhi says, nonviolence is not like a garment to be put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart. It's our inner attitude. And it must be an inseparable part of our very being. So it's not just a tactic. It's a way of being. And it starts in our heart, not just in our actions. Gandhi quoted the Bhagavad Gita, which is about a noble on a battlefield, and Gandhi pointed out the battlefield is our heart. Make no mistake. It's not about some battle out there. The battle's in here, if you're looking for a battle. And don't be violent towards yourself either in combating your violence. Have compassion on that as well. So you live in wisdom who see they live in wisdom who see themselves, this is from the Bhagavad Gita, who see themselves in all and all in them. Whose love for the Lord of love has consumed every selfish desire and craving tormenting the heart. Not agitated by grief or hankering after pleasure. They live free from lust and fear and anger. And all these things are sources of violence, aren't they? Fear, especially, towards others. Anger. All these passions which give rise to violence. We have to overcome them in our own hearts, and that's what our practice should be able to do. So such are the seers. So this is a real commitment. Gandhi spoke of making himself zero, but seemed to have become instead a kind of cosmic conduit, a channel for some tremendous universal power, an instrument of peace. So this is someone commenting on the Gospels and nonviolence. I would come to learn that nonviolence was ontological, at the very heart of God, or as I would say, at the heart of reality, however you conceive of it. Nonviolence is not ineffective, passive, weak, utopian, naive, unpatriotic, marginal, simplistic, or impractical. It actually works. It recognizes evil in the world, but responds to it with good. That's what we need to do. Nonviolence is actively confronting violence without violence, creatively engaging conflict, nurturing just, peaceful, and sustainable alternatives. And again, it's a way of thinking, a way of life, not just a tactic, but a way of putting love to work in the world. The violence of Gandhi is not a political weapon or a technique for social change so much as it is an essential art, maybe the essential art of civilization. And this is important too for us. It's a skill. Nonviolence is a skill, just like learning to read. So that's what we're doing in our practice. We're learning to be who we're called to be, who we really are, nonviolent. The transformation of anger is a skill. Love is a skill. All these can be learned. We cannot say we aren't capable of nonviolence. All we can say is we're not willing to do what is necessary to learn it. Our purpose should be making a lasting contribution to society. And Gandhi gives us a higher image for ourselves, a glorification of the innate goodness in the human being. And he concludes by saying, this is an article he wrote in 1936, "I have not the shadow of a doubt that any man or woman can achieve what I have if he or she would make the same effort and cultivate the same hope and the same faith." So that's what it's not just what we need to do in order to survive and be who we're called to be. It's who we are. That's why in the end it's not all that difficult. Although, as you're discovering in our practice and in our lives, it can be difficult being simply who we are, to actually get down to that point. But on the other hand, it should be easy in that sense, because it is who we are. It's the very nature of reality to be love and compassion and nonviolence. So let's give it a try.